Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome. How about another round of applause for that worship team? Wow. Wow. Hard not to get fired up for God when you hear that this morning, right? So let me introduce myself. My name is John Voskamp, and I'm actually the Connections Ministry Director here at Resonate. And as you may know, we are just wrapping up our series called Thank You Notes. And this was a series that was based sort of off the Jimmy Fallon late night show. And it was also a way for us, part of the church leadership, to get to know you, or for you to get to know us and know a little bit about our lives. And it was actually kind of funny when Pastor Rob came to me and asked me if I wanted to be part of this series and said we were going to be doing this Thank You Notes series on Jimmy Fallon. I said, sure, but who's Jimmy Fallon? And so I don't know if that's like the rest of you. I just don't watch late night TV. I'm maybe getting old. But then I thought, well, thank yous. It can't be that hard. I'm sure I'm just like the rest of you, and I spend most of my day sitting around all day long writing down things that I'm thankful for, right? Is that what all of you do? So I thought this would be easy to throw together. So with that said, what I'd like to do is I'm going to jump in this morning, and I'm going to do a few thank you notes this morning. And in the process, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and my life and what I was doing before I became a Christian, and then a little bit of my life after I became a Christian. So if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to kick off a few thank you notes here. And I'd love some music because that's how I always write thank you notes, is with a little bit of music. So, all right. So, thank you, God, for creating me in your image. I'm sure most of these people here didn't realize that you were short, overweight, and bald. So true, right? I don't know how you picture God, but I'm pretty sure he's a good-looking bald guy, just like Matt and I over here, right? Except for somehow he got to be tall and skinny. I got robbed. I don't know what that was about. All right. Thank you, Charleston Heston, for the movie The Ten Commandments. This was our only version of a Bible study when I was growing up. This is actually kind of a true statement. I was raised in a household where we would have considered ourselves Christians, meaning that I believed the stories, I knew who Jesus was, I knew the stories, but there wasn't really anything about us that would have led you to believe that we were followers, right? I don't recall ever reading the Bible growing up, or even owning a Bible for that much. But I do recall as a kid, for some reason it stands out in my mind, that every time Charleston Heston's Ten Commandments was on, somehow we ended up watching this epic saga that was like 3 hours long. And so I am your resident expert on Moses, okay? So if you want to know anything about baby Moses and all the way up through getting those 10 Commandments, I'm your guy. So just ask me about Moses. Thank you for creating 4 seasons. And then as a joke, only letting Minnesotans experience 2 of them. This seems so true here, right, in Minnesota. We go from hot to cold and back to cold and back to hot, and every once in a while we get a couple days in between where it rains, and we have a couple days we call spring and fall, but really it's just hot and cold. And it's kind of funny. I actually coach Little League Baseball in this unique state, and what's funny about it is the rest of the world plays like a 6-month baseball season, and they play maybe 2, 3, 4 days a week, but they stretch it out. Well, here, because the baseball season is so short, we find ourselves playing 6 days a week of baseball, trying to cram it into 90 days. So it's a pretty hectic 3 months. So if I'm completely checked out, for those of you that know me, over that 90-day window, it's just because I have baseball every day for 90 days. And maybe one last one here. Thank you for country music, to remind us just how messed up our lives actually are. Now, speaking of messed up, right, if you listen to country, you know what I'm talking about. But speaking of messed up, I'd like to share with you a little bit of my life and tell you about some of my life. But before we jump into that, I'd like to share with you a verse. It's an important verse to me. It's probably my favorite verse in the whole Bible. And it was actually funny, last week, Pastor Curtis shared this as one of his verses too. So maybe it's a lot of people's favorite verse, and you probably have heard it. But it's Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And it says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understandings, but in all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight." It's such a great verse, and it means so much to so many different people at different points in their life. And really what we're told in this verse is there's 4 things that we're breaking down here. And it says, to trust in the Lord with all your heart. And that sounds kind of good, right? Like, but what does that mean? Trust in the Lord with all your heart. And so I knew I was going to be sitting up here today, so I thought, well, I don't want to just guess as to what it means. So I thought I'd read some commentaries, look at a few things, and try to tell you what other experts on the subject think it means. So here's what one of the commentaries said. It says, to trust in the Lord with all your heart means to wholly and securely rely upon God's wisdom, power, and goodness, and upon his providence and promises for direction and help in all that you do. Right? So in other words, completely being reliant on God for everything that you do, everything that you're experiencing, you turn to God and you rely on God for it. And then he says to lean not on our own understandings, right? You're going to see this in my story. There were periods of time in this section of my life where I did not understand. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know where God was even at in parts of this story. Now, I can look back on it today and see it, but at the time when I was up to here in the thick of it, I didn't see where God was at. I didn't see him moving, and I certainly didn't understand what was going on. And then he says, in all your ways, submit to him. Now, I think this is the tough one. In all your ways, submit to him, because if you don't do the first part of it, it's really hard to do this part of it. In other words, if I don't trust God with all my heart, then I'm not sure how or even why I would choose to submit to him, right? So I've got to first trust him, and then I've got to submit to him. Now here's the promise, though. He says, and he will make your path straight. And I think you're going to see this in my story when I tell it to you, that this is certainly what happened. It was very obvious and very apparent after the fact that that's exactly what God was doing. But I think far more importantly, you're probably going to see it, if you're willing to look, in your own lives. You're going to see it in those chapters of your lives where you were going through difficult times and difficult struggles. And maybe for some of you, that's where you're at today. And so maybe this talk will hit home with you right now today in the situation that you're in. So my story begins in 2007. And this is when I officially became a Christian. I say officially because prior to that, I was a believer, meaning I believed the stories. But I certainly wouldn't have called myself a follower, if that makes sense. I wasn't doing anything outwardly that would have led anybody to believe that I was a Christian. And in fact, this is kind of funny. For those of you that know me, this will seem strange, but there was a period of my life where I couldn't stand Christian music. Right? Seems kind of weird. Today, I love Christian music. I play it all the time. I play the worship guitar, and I love it. But there was a period of my life where that just wasn't the case. In fact, if I got in the car and my wife was playing the Christian radio station, I couldn't reach for the knob fast enough to change the station. Right? It was really weird, and I just didn't enjoy it. And I remember we would drive, and we would have these like sort of little arguments, and I would say really intelligent, brilliant things like, I don't understand why anybody listens to this genre of music. How can you have an entire genre of music where every song is about the same subject? Right? I mean, at least with country music, you had crying, loving, and leaving. And so this was the type of debate we would have. And during this period of my life, I also was not a giver. And I was not about to give to the church. That just was not going to happen. I was not about to part with my hard-earned money and give it up to the church. I thought for sure that had to be a scam, right? I wasn't sure where that money was going. And it was actually kind of funny because during that period of my life, my wife would actually give to the church. And I didn't find this out for a long time later, but she would give, and I didn't know it. She was like what I call a closet giver, okay? So she was giving, and I didn't know it. I'm grateful for that today. But I was also extremely judgmental. And I wasn't like prejudiced against one group or another. I just sort of judged everybody equally and often. So if you were in my crosshairs, you were getting judged, right? That's just how I was. I was really good at judging others. But I heard a guy say it this way, and this has always sort of stuck with me. If I was on trial for the crime, let's say, of being a Christian, would there have been enough evidence to convict me? And the sad truth of it is no. There would not have been a shred of evidence that could have convicted me at this point in my life. So this may be a good spot here for another thank you note, if you don't mind, and we'll do one more here. So, thank you, Joel Osteen, for basically preaching the same sermon every Sunday, but somehow making it seem interesting and new. So I don't know if anybody in here is a Joel Osteen fan. I actually am. I like him a lot, and it was for me. it was funny. When I started listening to Joel Osteen, I don't know why. Maybe it was his smile. Maybe it was his personality. I think it's really hard. If you're in a bad mood, just test me on this one. Go listen to a Joel Osteen sermon. It is really hard. You'd have to be a very unique person to listen to one of his sermons and still be angry or still be in a bad mood. But there was a period of time where this was church for me. I wasn't willing to step foot into church. I didn't want anything to do with church, but I was willing to listen to his sermons on TV. And maybe I just liked the corny joke at the beginning, and then I would sort of listen to the rest of it. But it was through that process that I actually began to attend church. And I started to attend, and eventually I became a Christian, meaning that I became a follower, and I surrendered to Jesus and made him the leader of my life. And when I did this, things began to move quickly for me because I was all in. I'm one of these types of personalities that I got to be all in or all out, and so I was all in. And so I began with my wife, we began to attend church every Sunday at this point. We found a church we liked. We started to go every Sunday, and I don't think we missed a Sunday over about the next 5-year period of time. We never missed a Sunday. And I began to serve at church. I was on the setup team, the tear down team, the usher team, groups at my house, working in the kids' ministries, all of the above, and I just couldn't get enough of it. I had to be part of every aspect of the church, and we couldn't wait for Saturday mornings to come around because this was my day off, and we would shoot down to the Christian bookstore because I needed to buy more books on how to be a Christian. And in fact, it was kind of funny. I joke about it today. I probably read 6 books about the Bible before I ever even opened the Bible. So this was kind of where I was at. I was just so excited about being a Christian. Now, just prior to becoming a Christian, my wife and I, we had spent about 5 years trying to get pregnant. Now, some of you, maybe this is where you're at today, and maybe you can relate to this, but we were 5 years into this process and had not gotten pregnant yet. And it was sad, and it was disappointing, frustrating, and we were kind of giving up hope. And all of a sudden, our first blessing arrived, and this was my daughter, Dakota, our first child. And today, she's 11 years old, but what a blessing she was, and she was our firstborn. Of course, as a firstborn, she got all the attention, and rightfully so, right? And so things were seemingly going good. Just became a Christian, just had my first child, right? Life was good. But hold on, pump the brakes for a second. I don't know if anybody's ever experienced this when you became a Christian. Maybe I'm alone on this one. But for me, when I became a Christian, I sort of felt like I became a Christian and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. I don't know if anybody ever felt like that. Like I was expecting so much and it was so excited. And then all of a sudden my life started to do this. It started to spiral. Like everything that could go wrong started to go wrong. And I felt like, man, I got robbed. All I got was this lousy t-shirt out of the deal, right? And it's funny, we shouldn't guess as to what's going to happen about these difficult times when we become a Christian, because the Bible actually tells us it's going to happen. It warns us. But I will say this. As part of the selling proposition, when people are trying to convince you to become a Christian, they never lead with that. They never tell you how difficult things are going to be. That's like not one of the selling points. And so they save that for after the fact. But here's actually what the Bible says. It's in 1 Peter 4, it says, "Dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come on you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice inasmuch as you participate in the sufferings of Christ, so that you may be overjoyed when his glory is revealed." Now, I love this little part in there where it says, as though something strange were happening to you. Because that's really how it felt for me. I felt like during this couple-year window of my life after becoming a Christian, I felt like something strange were happening to me that was beyond my understanding because things were not going well. And so kind of here's where it gets interesting. And just to recap, just became a Christian, just had my first child, okay? Found out that we were pregnant again, child number 2 on the way, right? Now, we were so excited because we really only wanted 2, right? We were thinking, okay, we'll have 2, we'll stop there, life will be good. And about halfway through that pregnancy, I was at my office Christmas party, and I got a call that my wife was on her way to the hospital, but she had just had a miscarriage. I know for some of you, you've been there, you've been through this, and you can imagine this was a very trying time. This was an agonizing time. We were so sad, so frustrated and depressed, but God did eventually give us that second blessing. He did give us child number 2, and what a blessing he's been. And this is my son, Elijah. Many of you probably know Elijah. He's the young man that greets you at the front door when you walk in, and Hopefully he's doing a good job. Let me know if he's not. But it was kind of funny when we were merging the churches. We were coming from Turning Point and Brookwood and creating Resonate. My son only had one question, and that was, are they going to allow me to greet at the new church? I was like, well, of course they are. It's a deal breaker if not. And so it was just good to see that he has such a heart for wanting to serve and wanting to be part of what we're doing and creating that welcoming experience for others. But on my son's first birthday, it happened to fall on Easter weekend. And my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, they were visiting us. And we were celebrating Easter. We were celebrating my son's first birthday. Thought it was going to be this great weekend. When my mother-in-law, who was 58 at the time, she began to feel ill, kind of flu-like symptoms. And so she went to bed early that night. And the next morning when she woke up, she had these bruises all over her body. And we weren't sure what they were or what it was about. So we rushed her down to the hospital. And very quickly, they determined that she had a very fast-moving, very rare form of leukemia. And they rushed her to another hospital where they did a few more tests. And within about 48 hours of that, she had passed away. So we went from a celebration weekend to one of mourning and a very sad, tragic loss of my mother-in-law at a young age. Right about this same time, after losing our mother-in-law, I had a puppy. And some of you will appreciate this. If you don't have kids yet and you have a dog, you understand that that dog is your kid, right? Like they sleep with you, they go in your car with you, you take them everywhere, and they're sort of your kid. Well, prior to having kids, we had one of these dogs, and it was our baby. And of course, once we started having kids, the dog got a little less attention. But one of the things that was unique about my dog was she was a short hair pointer, and I was training her to become an AKC master hunter. Very tedious process, long drawn-out process, very expensive, very time-consuming. And I had spent 5 years training her for this, and she finally achieved her AKC master hunting title. Very cool, and I was so excited about this, and just a couple months right after this, she developed a stomach virus. And we were given two choices: remove her stomach, and she could try to live on meds for a period of time, might survive, might not, or put her to sleep. And so we decided to do what I think anybody would do, and we decided to put her to sleep, and this was a very difficult time in our life. Now, as if things weren't crazy enough with all of that going on, we had one more thing happen that was pretty significant. The company that I worked for, I didn't just work for them. I was actually the COO of this large company, and they got purchased by another company. And when this took place, they brought in their own executive team, their own leadership, and they eliminated my position sort of overnight. And in the process, I took a 70% pay cut because they gave me some trivial role. I don't even remember what it was. And in the process, we were not prepared for this, and our finances, we sort of spiraled out of control. And we ended up losing our house. We ended up going bankrupt. We ended up losing our house. We ended up losing our car. Things were not good. And so this is kind of where we were at in our life. We were in huge debt. Things were a mess. And so kind of to recap that timeline again, we had a miscarriage. We had our mother-in-law die. My dog died. I lost my job. We went bankrupt. We lost our house and car. And on top of all that, we needed a place to live, and I needed a job. So this is where we were at right after I became a Christian. But now for some good news, right? Now everybody likes the good news. This is always the fun part. Now there's not a lot of good news that comes out of going bankrupt. I can tell you that, so don't just do it for fun. But in the process of going bankrupt, you have two choices. You can either have a chapter 7 or a chapter 13. And a 7 is kind of what you want if you're going to go through this, because a 7 allows you to sort of have a fresh start. And so we were trying to get a 7, and this process is pretty lengthy, and we just weren't qualifying. We were kind of right on the edge, teetering towards it, but we were not there yet. And during this time, we found out that we were pregnant with child number 3. Good timing, right? And we found out that blessing number 3, my baby girl Zeta, was on her way. And it actually, oddly enough, it ended up being a tremendous blessing, because the timing of it was such that by having this third child, it pushed us right up to the edge of being able to qualify for a chapter 7. And so we were excited. We were so close, but we weren't quite there yet. we needed one more thing. So our bankruptcy attorney was looking through everything, going through our finances, and they discovered something that was kind of cool. We had been tithing for several years. Part of that time I didn't know about it, so I can't take credit for it, but we had been tithing for several years out of every paycheck. And normally they don't let you count this in a bankruptcy as an expense, but because we had done it so consistently for so long, they looked at it and they said, we're going to let you count that against your bankruptcy. And that, and the combination of the tithing and having that child, my third child, was enough to push us over the top and qualify us for a Chapter 7. Isn't God great? It's pretty amazing. And so through that, we still needed a place to live, right? So there was, I had landed a new job, but unfortunately, we were in St. Michael and my job was in Chanhassen, and in case you missed it, I didn't have a car. And so we needed a place to live, and so we found this house, oddly enough, literally across the street from my new job, about 50 yards. From my front door to the front door of my office is about 50 steps. This house came open for sale. Now, we just went bankrupt. We didn't have any money, and we didn't have any credit. And so I went over and I talked to the guy that owned the house, and he was willing to sell us the house on contract for deed. So here we got a house that I can literally walk across the street to get to work. And right after this, and I think truly this was just God showing off, right? Because sometimes God shows off just so you know that it's him. Like, you can't take credit for it. It's just unmistakably him. And that's what happened here. He had to give me a house where I could walk to work. How cool is that? Now, blessing number 4 arrived shortly after, and that was my baby girl, Raina Joy. And she is such a joy, such a joy. Anybody that knows her knows what a joy she is to be around. But let me say this, and maybe perhaps the greatest blessing coming through all of it and looking at it now, having come through it, is being able to sit here today and share this with all of you guys. And I say that because I know that there's somebody in here today, maybe a few of you, that are going through similar things, that are going through that financial struggle, going through that difficulty wanting to have a child, and maybe you're struggling in some other way in your life, with your marriage, whatever it is. And I just want to encourage you today to stay strong in your faith, to trust in the Lord with all your heart, because God truly is great and he's working for you. Let me conclude with this, and maybe this is the most important part. While we were going through this, every day as we were going through this, I would say to my wife, it's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. Just pray. Just read your Bible. And I honestly, I wasn't stressed out about it. I wasn't worried about it. I probably didn't say it quite like that. Like, I think if you asked my wife, she would say that I said, it probably sounded more like this: just get over it, stop worrying about it. And any of you that are married know that that's a really good thing to say to your wife. It always goes over well. They love that. But I just, truthfully, I wasn't worried. I slept like a baby. I didn't stress about it. I didn't worry about it. And because I knew that God was in control, and I knew that he would guide our steps. And so here's the thing. When you're going through this, and you're going through your difficult chapter of your life, you get to choose. You get to choose your attitude towards your situation, and you get to choose your attitude towards God. And I think if you truly believe that God can do all things, and you truly believe that he's in control of everything, and that he can move any mountains in your life, conquer any giants that are standing in your way, then I think we should all be living every minute of every day as if that were the case, right? Shouldn't we be living that way? And I also think that some struggles that God throws at us, he's doing it to increase our faith and show us that he is fully in control at all times. So I ask you to do this. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Submit to him and know that he's working for your good. For if you do this, I truly believe that indeed he will make your path straight. And I'd like to conclude with one final thank you note, if that's okay. All right. Thank you, God, for welcoming me home into your arms, and for welcoming so many others that are lost and away from you when we're ready to come back home.